So welcome to the Mental Health Online World Summit, and it is my absolute pleasure to have Adriana and Ted James with us tonight. I've been, I knew Ted and Adriana for quite some time, and to me, they're absolute world leaders in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, timeline therapy, and top experts in terms of how negative emotions and limiting beliefs affect our health, which is our subject. So welcome, Adriana and Ted. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thanks, Johannes.
So let's maybe get started and dive into it right away, because I think
Good
a lot
idea.
of people have questions or kind of wonder, is it really true that negative emotions and even beliefs, right, affecting our health? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think it's evident that negative emotions and limiting beliefs affect our health. I think we can tell by not from ourselves usually, because when we we can always tell with someone else, but not ourselves so much. But negative emotions are clearly a negative effect on health, and that's been proven in the Journal of the American Medical Association as far back as 996. There were articles on how negative emotions actually negatively impact your health.
Your heart health, your immune system in general. So anger, for instance, expressed or repressed, which is very interesting. I find this really interesting because many people dissociate and separate themselves from anger. Says, I'm not going to experience anger. The problem is then when that anger is being repressed, in other words, pushed somewhere in the body, it still affects the heart. It's very, very obvious. Or
Let me repeat the important part: anger expressed or anger repressed. Because a lot of people say, "Oh, well, I'm an angry person, but I express it so it doesn't affect me."
right.
No, the study showed it really does affect you,
So both
whether it's
ways.
expressed or not.
Correct. So then limiting beliefs. It's kind of obvious. Think of it, a belief that plagues most people nowadays, and I use that word plagues on purpose. Most people is the belief having to do with self-worth,
Not good
the
enough.
not good enough, not capable enough, not fill in the blanks enough. It's a permanent comparison where we all come up short. Now, if you have a belief that's of that nature, then permanently somewhere lurking underneath your consciousness is going to be this unhappy comparison because you're permanently feeling less than something, some ideal or some ideal standard or somebody else. And
That's for
that in a long time surely will influence our mental health, our emotional health.
What does that do? What does it do? It negatively impacts the health, and we're clear about that from the work of metamedicine. And
Oh,
meta health.
absolutely.
We're clear
Absolutely.
about that from the work of meta health because we've got studies with CAT scan that show that the brain is impacted.
Definitely.
For sure.
Definitely. So people ask us in the trainings all the time, what scientific proof do you have that this happens? And we always refer to your work, guys, at the Meta Health, because I mean, how much more scientific proof you want? You have the CAT scans, you have the brain expressing and showing clearly the influence and then the
And you
relationship
can actually
between.
see the physical effect
Sure.
of the negative emotions and limiting decisions on the actual brain relay.
Well, it's very, very clear. And but see, the problem is, Johannes, that most people are unaware of this because in our society we don't talk about that. It's almost like we're still somewhere in Victorian times where emotions are something bad. We don't talk about them, and
And we don't express them, especially.
surely.
In fact, it's
So-
become illegal to express many emotions in the workplace in California, for example.
Yeah.
So if you express anger in the workplace, you've got to go to anger management, which, by the way, doesn't get rid of anger. It just stuffs it down.
Yeah. You said two very important things which would like to mention. First of all, that don't misunderstand us. We're not into expressing anger at workplace. We think that letting go of negative emotions makes human relations with others much better.
We'll talk about that shortly.
So, but second thing is the fact that I'm saying there is a good intention behind, okay, we don't express negative emotions in the workplace,
There's a good intention behind anger management.
But at the same time, Ted mentioned something important. Anger management doesn't work because it doesn't get rid of anger. And here is the
The
pivotal
anger
point.
stays there at the unconscious level. It's still seething. It's still affecting the body. It's still causing the hormones to be generated, the adrenaline and so forth to be generated. But it's not particularly positive for the body, although it helps in the workplace. So there's a solution, and the solution, of course, is timeline therapy.
So, as you know, Johannes, Ted has created this technique somewhere back in the 80s, 86, 87. So there is pretty much a long experience already with noticing the difference in people when they have negative emotions stored in the body, and I'm going to explain that in a second, or limiting decisions or limiting beliefs stored in the memories of the body. So here is how it works. And that's the comparison with a bunch of beautiful other techniques that make us feel better in the moment. But here is the difference. Something that makes us feel better in the moment doesn't necessarily let go of the root cause that happened somewhere in the past.
Some of the techniques scramble the ability to experience the emotion. But the problem is the emotion is still in the body and it's still in the brain relay.
So,
But
okay,
it's scrambled so it doesn't feel like it's actualized
exactly,
at the moment.
exactly. So let's go.
Maybe talk a little bit about, because I mean you've been doing this for so many years, for like I think 25, 30 or more years, and
30 years, yeah.
Yeah.
this amount of experience, through the workshops, the trainings you do, and also the books you wrote, which are quite some. And so go back a little bit, how you kind of discovered that whole, time paradigm, meaning that it actually, this information is somewhat stored, which we know through epigenetics now. We also know that this is really the case.
For sure.
Yes, it is.
So kind
For
of,
sure.
guide our listeners through this process, and also what does that mean in terms of time, that actually these memories are stored within our matrix, or whatever you call it. So
For sure. By the way, we're big fans of Dr. Bruce Lipton, and we surely appreciate his willingness to come out and put forth for the rest of us to know what's really happening in epigenetics. So that is a great appreciation. So I think you should talk a little bit about how you discovered timeline therapy and what makes the difference between timeline therapy and all sorts of other emotional or even spiritual techniques that make us feel really good in the moment.
It was around 1984 or 85, maybe 86, when I discovered timeline therapy. I was standing on the street corner in Honolulu, where I lived at the time, and was talking to one of my students. I was a master trainer of NLP and still am. And was talking to one of my students, and we were both waiting for a ride, and she said something like, "I've got a lot of anger on this particular event that happened a while back." And I said, you want to play around? Let's see what happens if we do this. And she said, sure. We were both waiting for a ride, so it didn't matter. So I said to her, go back, float above your timeline and go back up to the first event. So you're looking at the event, you're facing the past. I said, where's the anger? And she said, it's down there in the timeline. It's right down there in the timeline. And I said, now go back so you're directly above the event. Where's the anger? She said, it's right below me. And then I said, go back before the event occurred by 15 minutes or so and turn around and look toward now. Where's the anger? And she said, it disappeared. And I said, no, don't fool around. Where is it? And she said, no, it really disappeared. And then I thought, wow, I think that could be useful for some people to get rid of anger.
Last timeline therapy has been born.
So, although it doesn't sound like it's really with a lot of research, it was my way of discovering it because she did it. So she could let go of the anger. And what I found was everyone else can. Not just anger, but all negative emotions.
But think of it. The notion of timeline is not new.
No.
The notion of timeline itself is not new. It's
Aristotle talked about it in Physics 4.
been ancient Greeks.
So basically you're saying that these memories or these experiences we have, they're somehow stored in our system, mostly in a timeline, or they're
All of our
organized that
memories.
way.
All of our memories from the past are generally for, there was a study done in 1978 called How People Perceive Time. And what they found was that 98 to 99% of all people store their memories either spatially or linearly or both. And so everyone, pretty much 99%, 80, 98% of people have a timeline.
But here is the if I may interject. See, Johannes, memories are actually stored holographically throughout the body. There is not a certain one single area in the brain somewhere that stores all the memories. Actually, every cell in the body stores holographically the memories of the body. And we're fond of giving this example. If you happen to cut your finger, let's say, and then you have a scar left there, right?
But
theoretically, the skin, all your skin is brand new. All your skin cells are brand new in about 30 days. So
you have brand new skin every 30 days.
So how does that skin remember to still create the scar? And the explanation is because the memories of that cut are still stored in the body.
Like
so it's true with
plus the emotions and the beliefs, right?
Right. So it's true exactly. So exactly the same thing is true for negative emotions and limiting or negative beliefs that are stored in the body. So that's number one. But somehow, now I'm coming full circle to where you were, somehow it seems that in order to make sense or to the mechanics of accessing our memories is linear in a timeline.
Most everybody stores their time linearly. That is, in a timeline, and with the past in a certain direction and the future in another direction. A line, by the way, timeline doesn't mean a straight line. It could be a curved line, could be a position in space, could be a conglomeration of memories in a certain area. But pretty much everyone has a storage of time which is either spatial or linear. And that makes it very easy to work with people to let go of the stuff in the past.
Because people do this, I mean, the unconscious mind does this anyway. So think of it. Was it ever a time when you had something bothering you and then somehow you got completion on that and all of a sudden it didn't bother you anymore?
You've had that experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone has, and that shows that it's easy for your unconscious mind to let go of negative emotions and limiting decisions.
But
once you gain resolution on the issue.
But what timeline therapy does,
Because what I've heard a lot of people say is, well, that's all good, but it doesn't apply for me. Or they say, I'm having a really hard time letting go of these emotions. They seem so big, so intense,
oh, sure.
So what is your experience with clients? I mean, why why do some people have a hard time even addressing it or are afraid addressing emotions, which happens very often, I would think?
I was actually working with a guy whose nickname was Frosty, and I was doing a seminar in Salt Lake City. And somebody came up to me and said, Frosty we were letting go of anger and sadness, and Frosty didn't let go of either one. And so I said to the class, I said, there's somebody in class that needs to let go of a negative emotion, and if you have the guts to come up here, then we'll work on it together. And Frosty raised his hand, and he said, okay, that's me, and I'm happy to do it. So he came up, and his anger wasn't releasing. And I said to him, in order to let go of the anger, you're going to have to be willing to feel the sadness which is underneath the anger. And he burst into tears and his anger disappeared. So sometimes people think that they need to act a certain way, so they're not going to access those emotions.
Because they're painful.
And they don't. And the thing about timeline therapy is you don't have to access the negative emotions and you don't have to access the memories.
That's the thing.
So you don't have to. In timeline therapy, we don't wallow in the negative emotions. We don't sit there in the negative emotions and go, oh, this is, as some other techniques do, oh, this is what happened when I was young. We don't actually do that.
We don't relieve the emotions.
Dive into the story, or you need a
No. We don't have
or anything like that.
Correct.
We don't have the client relieve the traumatic memory.
So a number of techniques put the client back into memory and then either attempt to scramble it or attempt to have the person abreact to it. Right. But timeline therapy doesn't do that. It's not necessary to let go of a negative emotion or a limiting decision or a limiting belief. It's not necessary to re-access the event when it first happened.
Now, how is that possible? It's possible because timeline therapy is a process.
Structural.
It's a structural process, operates on structure and not on content.
Right.
So most people focus on the content. Why did this happen to me? And trying to figure out from within the content of a certain traumatic memory what happened. Now, timeline therapy operates on the structure, on how those memories are being held in consciousness, and how by the process of changing relative spatial position above the timeline, by the way, we're not in the timeline, we're not in the memories, above the timeline, how to restructure those memories so that the negative emotions disappear. That's one of the major things that is the difference between how most people think about their traumatic content from past memories, versus timeline therapy. This is why, Johannes, to answer your question, the other part of your question, this is why is as easy to let go of something this tiny and something really gigantic that happened in the past.
Because they both have a structural component. And it's just as easy to let go of a big, intense emotion than it is to let go of a very small, not so intense emotion.
Also, we need to keep in mind what we call secondary gain. So let's say that you go through life and you are doing your absolute best, right? Which most people are trying their best all the time.
Most people are doing.
And all of a sudden something happens to you, something exactly like in Meta Health, something that is shocking, surprising, takes people by surprise. It's extremely dramatic, full of negative emotions. People have no strategies to deal with that. They can't even talk about it. So it takes them like, what just happened to me?
Right.
All of a sudden, yeah? And in that moment, pardon me, in that moment, they're just blown out of the water. Now, sometimes, because of that event, people are getting hooked on what we call secondary gain. I have to pay them back because they hurt me.
What they did to me.
Because of what they did to me, I didn't deserve it.
So explain a little bit more about secondary gain, because I think a lot of therapists especially, they don't really know about that concept, and they wonder why, especially if somebody has a chronic issue, it just is not resolved. They've used a lot of these wonderful techniques they know. So explain the secondary gain a little bit and how it also affects not being able to release these negative emotions or limiting beliefs.
Secondary gain comes about where the gain from having the problem is greater than the negative effects of the problem itself.
Right.
So
Like the energy that is in the situation.
It's more like a reason to have the problem. So if I don't have this problem, let's start with if I have this problem. If I have this problem, I'll get more love from my parents. If I have this problem, I'll get more love from my spouse. If I have this problem, I'll get more support from my coworkers.
If I have this problem, at least in my mind, I'll get them back.
That too. So I need to suffer. I've worked with so many clients, I can't tell you, who said, I need to suffer to show my parents what they did to me. And you know what? I tell them, if your parents had any awareness, they would already know that you suffer. And are they ever going to find out? And of course, the answer is no. Parents are never going to find out that you suffer.
Or the parents is just an example.
If they notice, they're not going to notice.
Any person that hurt you.
So that's what we call secondary gain. And the problem with secondary gain is that it tends to cause the person to hold on to the problem with tenacity and not let it go easily.
And see, this is why we're so adamant that NLP comes in very handy, because there's this process which Johannes, which is called reframing.
Right.
In order to resolve a secondary gain, you apply reframing. You reframe the problem. You use sleight of mouth, which is still from NLP, to reframe the problem. All of a sudden, because see, the client may even want at the conscious level.
Consciously. That's why he's there.
To let go. But at the unconscious level, there is resistance, and that resistance is called secondary gain.
Right.
So then you can work with that. You can sometimes even bringing to the client's attention through reframing the fact that they have this gain. It's sufficient to go, oh, really? And then all of a sudden the unconscious mind is free. People say, but if the unconscious mind lets go naturally of negative emotions, why doesn't the unconscious mind do it already? Because, see, one of the prime directives of the unconscious mind is to listen to the orders given by the conscious reasoning. That's why we have a logical, reasonable mind.
And sometimes the conscious mind gives conflicting orders. One day it says, oh, I'll pay these people back, and so I'll suffer more. And the other day it says, I don't want to suffer. So the conscious mind goes back and forth. We go back and forth, and we give conflicting messages to the unconscious mind, which is why the unconscious mind may not let it go.
Which leads me a little bit to answer your very first question about the theme, which is, why do we have the limiting beliefs and limiting decisions that we hold in our unconscious mind? Because we think consciously that we're positive. We think consciously that we think positive thoughts. How come then beneath the surface in the at the unconscious level, we have all those old, I dare to call it programming, if you want.
Yeah.
So here we are, just, 1, 2, 3-year-olds, little people roaming around,
This big.
and we haven't developed the critical faculty just yet, which usually develops around what, age 7, right? So we absorb like sponges out of our environment everything uncritically. Now, many times beliefs that limit us, even negative emotions that limit us, come to us by the well-meaning people in our environment. For instance, maybe your mother said to you, just because she wants you not to have unrealistic expectations and not to set yourself up for failure, feeling failure. It's very hard to make money. Nobody really makes money.
So you adopt that as a belief.
Unquestioning, you don't even remember when you adopted it. It's not even yours.
But you believe your mother, so you adopt that as a belief.
Now you grow into an adult person, you don't even remember where you have this belief, but it becomes the rule in your life.
Right. Actually, that is very interesting. And can you dive into that a little bit more in terms of the unconscious mind, how these past experiences, especially as children or as,
Oh my God.
how that really affects us, and also in terms of parents, because I think a lot of parents that are listening wonder, well, am I doing everything wrong, or what I'm supposed to do then? How do I teach my children, especially when they're very, very young?
Let's talk about health, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about health. Just think of it, if somebody in the family, out of good intentions, wanting to protect the children, says, well, in our family, everybody had trouble with the eyes, everybody wears glasses, or we have a history of blah, 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 and then you name the disease.
When I was a certain age, my dad called me into his study, and he said, now let me tell you what the family diseases are, son, because you're going to get them. And I said, no, I don't want to get them. So you have to reject your parents' beliefs in many cases. And you've probably heard it said, all the men in our family are this way, or all the women in our family are this way, or everybody in our family wears glasses, or blah, 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 blah. And there are a lot of beliefs that are passed down through
genealogical.
The family. We call it genealogical.
Yeah, it's not genetic.
It's not genetic. It's passed down genealogically, which means it's passed down unconsciously from father to son, mother to daughter, and so forth, or mother to son,
or
passed
even
down through the family.
Immediate family members, could be grandparents, could be the relatives close to the children as they grow up.
But see, before age 7, you don't have a filter on that, so it's automatically just installed at the unconscious level.
Yeah.
It goes right into your unconscious mind, and that's how it is.
Oh, we're talking about family, but what about the media that we hear all the time? And we notice advertising. I don't know how it's in Europe, but here in the US, 8 out of 10 commercials on the TV are now about different medications. And the interesting part is that the images associated with the commercials, the images are showing younger and younger people,
Right.
like people in their early 20s, suffering of diseases that even 20, 30 years ago were diseases that appeared in a small percentage of older people. But now it has become something common.
Right.
And see, all this unchecked, meaning unchecked, the conscious mind of young children is not present because it's not formed yet as a critical faculty. And all these messages come in unchecked, unfiltered, and the problem is that they become life rules. This is how it is. And it's not.
We're all going
Is
to
that
go out.
all limiting beliefs then? In terms of also define maybe a bit more limiting beliefs. Um, because is it everything belief or is it
A limiting
what's the
belief is any
quality of a
belief.
limiting belief?
A limiting belief is any belief that limits you. That makes it rather simple. So, what are the beliefs that you
Very
have?
simple.
It is.
Good
So,
definition. I like short. Short is good.
any belief that limits you is a limiting belief. And with timeline therapy, we can get rid of those. Any emotion that doesn't feel good in your body is a negative emotion. Both limiting beliefs and negative emotions can cause Yudin moments, can cause the client to have.
Let's talk about that a little bit because in mental health, what we experienced or have seen is that often people trying to find this Udin moment, which is really a traumatic moment, a significant emotional experience, which we know really triggers certain health issues in certain
For
parts
sure.
of our body. Now, but often we can find it. And so you're kind of stretching our imagination here, or are you challenging our thinking that actually can be passed down from our parents or even other possibilities are there?
No, two things. One is it could be very deeply buried. But the other thing is, and we've noticed this in the last year or so, maybe last 2 years, is that a negative event doesn't need to be gigantic in terms of negative emotions in order for it to be a Yudin moment. So, for example, the example in meta health, the allergy example of with hay fever, and the first love experience is in the hay, and so then every time the hay ripens or puts pollen in the air, you start sneezing. So that doesn't necessarily have to be a big negative event.
Gigantic.
It could be something that's quite small. And we found in the last couple of years, we found that some of the events are not gigantic events. They're not big earth shaking, oh my God, like that. They're actually could be quite minor, but a mistaken notion. So we found that Yudin moments can come from
And that depends on the threshold of the person.
and see unexpected. Okay.
Yeah,
What
let's
for
define this Udin because a lot of people might not know. So,
So
yeah.
unexpected, dramatic, isolating, can't speak about it, and no strategy.
no strategies.
No strategy to deal with it. In other words,
Don't know what to do.
What do I do? I
Don't know
can't.
what to do.
So that doesn't necessarily imply a major negative emotion.
But it depends what you call majors. See, for some people, breaking a nail could be a major event, and for some people, dealing with
Guys, I think usually.
Not so much. Not,
I was just thinking about no.
it depends what's the threshold. There are people who handle 2-3 jobs, and they have children at home and parents to take care of, and they work over the weekend and they do this. And I go, something happens, they go, another one of those. And if somebody breaks a nail and they go, oh my God, it's the disaster of my life. So it depends where the threshold is
for the person.
for the person.
Yeah.
So that's one thing also important. What did I want to say? You were talking about
About in terms of obviously there can be traumatic life events right now. I mean, in our current life basically, but you still
Oh,
also
boy.
it could go back into the past. So because I mean, you talk about timelines, so maybe also for the therapists that listen, because I think a lot of therapists still have a little bit of problem accepting the fact or even integrating that into their work that you can go back in time. How far can you go back?
so this thinking that you describe, we will call limiting beliefs.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I don't believe that that's possible. How do you know?
Yeah, and someone is working with a client and doesn't believe that you can go back in the past. Well, then they're not going to go back in the past. But what we found is it's possible to clear up all sorts of things that look serious from a medical point of view in a matter of a very short period of time using timeline therapy.
In fact, we did a coaching session with we shouldn't say the name for privacy issues, with a medical doctor, which is a very high rank at the leadership of the American Academy for Anti-Aging Medicine. And so we did some timeline therapy, and then, dare I say, we did a hypnotic process where we have direct response.
We turned up his metabolism
from the unconscious mind, and so now, as a fully trained medical doctor with the medical expertise and very open-minded person, we turned up his metabolism.
and he started to sweat.
He started to sweat. He turned beet red. He started to sweat. So he had a clear physiological experience of his metabolic rate going up.
And then he said, damn it, I'm a medical doctor. And I know that nothing that I do in my mind should affect my body. And yet here I am, my metabolism is definitely turned up. So there are beliefs
that we consider to be true. Absolutely
there are beliefs that exist in the world that we consider to be true.
Absolutely true.
Which are not true. So the problem is that many of those beliefs limit the ability of the person who's the client and the person who's the therapist to heal the client. And so if this was originally pointed out, I think in 1943 by George Estabrook, and also in 1957 by Andre Weitzenhofer. Weitzenhofer wrote the book, The General Techniques of Hypnotism. And Weitzenhofer said that what the hypnotherapist does not believe to be true, the client will not actualize. Which I say to all my students when we're teaching them how to do timeline therapy, I say, look, you limit your client by your beliefs. So if you have beliefs about what's possible, you will limit your client's ability to get rid of it. Whereas, if you sit there and you hold an unlimited, magnificent viewpoint about your clients, which is this client can heal anything. This client can become totally healthy. And just your projecting that onto them is going to make a difference in their ability to heal. So if you sit there and say, I know he can't do it, it's quite possible that he is not going to actualize that for you, or for himself even. So you've got to guard your beliefs.
So you believe anything is possible, any health issue can be healed, and looking from that, maybe as you said, from a medical doctor perspective, can you explain it a bit more? Because I'm sure a lot of medical doctors listening in, and they have these like amazingly intense health issues, diseases, starting with cancer, diabetes, whatever it is, and they might wonder, well, that's easily said, but that's not my experience. So what would you say to them?
What I would say to them is, what mindset did you begin with? Did you look at your patient and say, oh, he's got cancer, he's going to die? In your mind. Because it's very clear that they did this study in a school, and they told the teacher that all the students were retarded. And so all the students acted like they were retarded and got grades of retardation. So they got C's and D's. And then they took the same kids and put them in another classroom the next semester and told the teacher these students were all brilliant and the special ed teacher wasn't available, so she'd have to struggle to keep up with them. And they all got A's and B's. So what the proof was that the belief of the teacher and the projection of the teacher onto the students caused the students to act a certain way. I'm certain this is absolutely the same in a transaction called therapy or coaching. We believe absolutely that your beliefs limit the client. So the first thing I'd say to a medical doctor is, what's the belief system you approached this healing with? Did you approach this healing with, here's an example. The Harvard University study on osteoarthritis.
About 15 years ago.
Harvard was actually granted a use patent based on this particular study. And what they did was they took 50 people.
Don't know if they were 50, I don't remember the number exactly, but they took a bunch of people, they were scheduled for surgery.
For arthritis.
Mm-hmm. And they gave them a tablespoon of grounded chicken cartilage in orange juice.
Every morning.
And what was the number of days after?
5 days.
Don't quote us on this. I might not be correct the number of days, but the point being that 100% of the people eventually had a remission of symptomology. So that's an approach that was nutritional based, because there were lack of building blocks in the body that didn't remake the cartilage. Now, is that the only thing you should do? No, I think that a lot of things in terms of healing, medical doctors will be much benefited if they approach it from all different directions. And you said something very important in your question. You said, do you believe that everybody can heal anything? Short answer, yes. Long answer, it depends. It depends on the doctor's beliefs. It depends on the client's beliefs. It depends on the nature of approach, because you do mental work, emotional work, nutritional work, physical work, allopathic medicine approach, and you put it all together in a package. It's not one or the other.
I think this is important to say. If we're going to do healing work, we have to believe that the client who sits in front of us
So mindset.
Right.
can heal himself.
Right.
We have to believe that, because if we don't believe that, we're going to project onto
With
him
disadvantage to
not
him.
healing.
With disadvantage to
So
client.
yeah, so we have to be out there in terms of what our
But
beliefs
then there
are.
are two people in this relationship. Is the doctor and it's the patient. And both doctor and patient held beliefs. Now the doctor may absolutely have, let's say you have an open-minded doctor that goes, absolutely, I believe in this person and I will assist this person and I take this person step by step and they could heal it. But what if the patient himself sits there and go, oh my God, I know that cancer kills people. That's what I've been told all day long. TV,
And I've
media,
seen it.
everything.
I-
I've seen
and
it.
he's seen it.
I've seen lots of people dying of cancer. I am condemned to death. Now, those are beliefs that run counterproductive to healing.
Especially if you're the one doing the healing work, especially the doctor.
If
who's
you
doing
start
the
with
healing
that
work.
mindset,
If you start with that mindset,
Whoa.
you're going to project that onto the client.
so then this client needs to let go of this in order to allow free healing to occur. I mean, when I say free, I mean the unconscious mind being free of those barriers, those beliefs that don't allow the body to heal. It is the nature of the body to heal.
And here's the question. Here's the question. Here's the question. Can I see this client healing himself? Can I see this client being totally whole and totally healed? Do I think that, and by the way, I have to, or I have to refer him to someone else. I have to see this client being totally capable of healing himself, or my ethics say I should refer him to someone else who can.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful, and I think maybe that's something whoever is listening that isn't a therapist or medical doctor, whatever field they're in, I think that is something to really consider right now. You know,
It's the same thing with coaching. If you're going to work with somebody who wants to increase his income, I sit there and I say to myself, can I see this person getting rid of the limitations that prevent him from making as much money as he'd like? Or can I see this person having a great relationship, and so forth? And I think everyone can, at least from the beginning. Now, some people are resistant. Some people have secondary gain, as we said before, for not doing it. But for the most part, I have to be able to see the clients that come to me, and Adriana does too, and I know you do too, Johannes, is we need to be able to see them being perfect and whole
Capable.
and healed, capable of healing and doing that.
Hold that mindset. And of course, we need to take both responsibility. The coach in our case, or the doctors, yes, as you mentioned, and the patient. That's another issue, Johannes, because
I was about to ask you. So if the
I read your
belief-
mind.
the belief that a therapist should have, or ideally has, is that everything is possible. And what about the
Yes.
patient then?
Yes. And you can't sit there and go, oh, this guy's got cancer, he's going to die in 6 months, because those are the statistics. That's just, in my opinion.
buying into limitations,
Yeah.
buying into a limited, boxed, like in a box model of the world. I'm using an NLP jargon called model of the world, is how we perceive the world around us,
And what beliefs we have about it.
which is not serving neither the doctor nor the patient. In our case, neither the coach nor the client in terms of successful results of the interaction.
Yeah.
So how would you, if somebody's listening, has a major health issue, what would you tell them how to, I guess, first of all, what kind of therapist to look for? And then also, what can they do right now to change these beliefs, you know, and to be more open towards new possibilities? What would you tell them?
Right.
Well, a very simple way of doing this is to imagine going back on your timeline, even if you're not sure where it is.
Above
Your timeline.
always above the timeline.
Imagine going back above your timeline to the point where you made the decision, to the point where you adopted that belief.
So here's very simple, is if you ask yourself, so if I knew where this belief started, where did I, the very first time, because beforehand I didn't have it and all of a sudden I had it.
I know I don't know it consciously, but let's just ask my unconscious mind.
Here is the wrong way to do this, is to sit there and think of it and analyze it critically for the next half an hour. That's the wrong way to do this.
And I have seen it so often.
Yeah,
You know, that
but
people
because
they torture their mind and try to
very analytical.
like wrap their mind around it.
No, that's the wrong
not the
way.
way to do
That's
it.
the
I've seen
wrong
it
way
so
to.
often. So tell again,
So-
what is the other option? So one is to really think very hard. What's the
No,
other
don't
option?
do that.
That's the wrong way
Just
to
take
do
whatever
it.
comes up. Just say to your unconscious mind, if I knew when was the first time I
The
adopted
very
this
first
belief.
thing that comes to your mind, and by the way, it comes very quickly, fraction of a second. So you got to catch it.
Take that and go with it.
Take that. That would be the very first time.
Finding the first time, you can float above your timeline back to that event.
And that's
go-
a process of active imagination. You simply imagine yourself doing that.
So in active imagination, what you do is you actively imagine what's being suggested. So one wouldn't say, at that point, one wouldn't say, oh, I don't have a timeline. No, because we're asking you to actively imagine having a timeline. So what you do is float above your timeline, go back before the event occurred, and redecide or rethink about the belief and where that belief came from.
Maybe it didn't even come from you.
Maybe it was your parents.
Maybe it was your parents. Maybe it was an uncle. Maybe it was a neighbor.
Maybe it was my dad said every man in this family's had prostate problems. Well, I don't want to hear that. He says it's hereditary. I'm going, no. So I need to change my thinking about that, or else I will create it, because it only takes 20 or 30 years for me to create it. Even if it does, I'll still have a prostate problem, but I'm not going to, because I'm clear that I have different beliefs than that now. I'm clear that I have different beliefs, and I've changed my belief and thinking about it. So it's very simple to do that, as long as you go back before the event occurred.
So let's take a general example that most people, many people have. And is the belief that if I am diagnosed with blah, you name it, a big disease, that will be a death sentence. Yeah, because we hear this all the time, for cancer, for this, for that, and statistics. And by the year 2020, I don't know how much percentage of the population will have blah, and we're bombarded all day long with that. So there was a time before which one person didn't have this belief. So now they can imagine, okay, where did I adopt this belief? I don't take it for granted. I don't take it as the truth. I realize it's just a belief. So now I imagine I'm floating above my timeline. However you imagine that, it's just imagination. It's not real, it's imagination, it's in your mind.
It's a process of active imagination.
So you imagine floating above a line which you define as being your timeline, and trusting your unconscious mind, say, okay, where did I decide that? When did this? And the first thing that comes to mind, it could be age 27, it could be age 42, it could be from parents.
Age 3.
Could be anywhere, you know? And then going back and reevaluating this. Okay, so this came to me. It doesn't have to be this way. It could be differently. Yeah, it could be differently, because there are many people that are examples of healing. We call them miraculous healing. Well,
we call them spontaneous remissions. And so in medicine, the client who gets rid of his problem without the doctor's intervention has a spontaneous remission. And here's what I think about. I don't think about all the people that are going to die. I think about all the people that have had spontaneous remissions. How many people in this case have had spontaneous remissions without any treatment? And how does that happen?
so now that's
How
a
do I make that happen?
more empowering belief that holding in your mind that, okay, that many people have died.
Well,
That doesn't work, right?
yeah, and you said something that struck me before. You said just a belief.
It's just a belief.
Just,
Right.
but I think from my experience, a lot of people that they have a hard time with the just, which means
Yes.
not that it's easily to change, but is it really?
No, it is easy
Yes,
to change
with
with
timeline
timeline
therapy,
therapy.
it's easy.
Very easy to change with timeline therapy.
Yeah, honest, we do trainings over trainings over trainings. I joined TED in 2001. I'm doing training since 98 myself. This year, by the way, because you mentioned 30 years, TED celebrated 30 years as a master trainer of NLP. And TED is usually...
Thank you.
He's pretty self-composed and, very
She got me on that one.
Cool-headed.
I actually had some tears.
At the end of the master practitioner, the people in the office in Australia and here, we have made a certificate for TED, and we calculated how many hours of teaching are in 30 years. We came up with 1,800,600 and something. I don't know what.
Whoa.
Wow,
and so we made a certificate for TED, and at the end of master practitioner, so our graduates come to take their certificate, take pictures, and here's this special certificate coming, and TED is going to take the certificate. And our sales manager said, no, this is not. And Ted looks at me and said, what's up with this? And what's happening? And then he read the certificate, and Ted was teary, and everybody. It's 30 years, Ted. It's a long time.
That's a hell of a long time.
I know you guys for a while, and it's not just 30 years. It's pretty much 24/7 for you guys. You're so engaged and so innovative, which is really wonderful. But let me go back to the just beliefs, because my experiences, and especially, let's say, you go into societies where like thinking seems a bit more dense, which is they have a harder time to change their thinking, like, for example, as you know, I've lived in California, I'm living in Germany and other places, and people are very different the way they behave, and in some countries it's very hard for them to change their thinking, right? It takes them like many years. So talk a little bit about that, some of the experiences you had, how easy it could be, and what are the factors that determine that somebody can change a belief very easily.
We worked with a guy who, speaking of Germany, who flew in from Germany. He was a business owner.
At the time, he was mid to late 30s.
He was a PhD, no PhD, but all but dissertation.
Yeah,
in business.
He was finishing his dissertation. Good-looking fellow, very intelligent.
Yep. Great relationship. And he said, I'm bothered by a voice in my head that continually puts me down and rags on me and tells me I'm no good.
He says, I wake up in the middle of the night, conflict active, of course, in the middle of the night, and the voice is there. Wake up at 3 a.m., the voice is there.
The voice starts talking to him even when he's asleep. So he hears this voice in his head telling him he's no good, and he hears it 24 hours a day.
Nothing you've done is good enough. This is no good. That's no good.
You're just a bum. You'll never amount to anything, and so forth. And he's already amounting to something. He's already got a great business. He's already getting his doctorate. The guy is doing very well.
He's owning his own company. He's successful. He's smart. He's good looking. We're looking at this fellow go, how is it possible? Yeah, how is it possible?
How is it possible that he does that? And so we asked him, and he said, well, my father always used to rag on me when I was a kid.
His father came from the Deutsche Demokratische Republic, while he was there, moved over to the West. And in the old Eastern Bloc, the method of educating your children was to permanently tell them that they are no good so that they strive to become better.
So what a belief.
So good intention.
Talk about a belief.
Well, good intention from the parents, bad application, because children all grow up with the idea that they are never good enough.
Right. So here's this guy who has this voice in his head that rags on him 24 hours a day.
Now his father passed away.
His father passes away, and he internalizes his father. So the part of him inside him was a part that was his father. It was his father who was ragging on him.
His father's voice.
So we just did parts integration from NLP and timeline therapy, and it took about 20 minutes. And at the end of the process, he said, it's quiet in my head for the first time since I can remember.
And then he said something really funny. He said, you know what, my problem feels insulted because I had it for so many years and it disappeared in such a short amount of time. That's the thing that you asked about belief is just a belief.
When you say it's just a belief, it's the thing is that we can change beliefs like that very quickly.
But it's hard for a person who holds a very dear belief in their mind to realize that it's just a belief, because they think this is how it is. And as long as this is how it is, there is no room for anything else. So our advice in general is for the people to strive to do their best to keep an open mind. Maybe there is something else out there that I didn't consider yet. Another approach, another way of looking at the same issue or the same problem or the same thing. Because if you have just one narrow focus or point of view, you are missing out of everything else that's possible. Now,
Right.
we all have cherished beliefs. We all have our beliefs that we love and we think that they serve us, and we
We all have negative emotions.
all have negative emotions. We have
Even
all,
we have negative
oh,
emotions.
sure, it's part of being human, right? But negative emotions serve a purpose, Johannes, as you know. For meta health, it's very clear. Negative emotions show us when something's wrong.
Yeah,
But the point is not to hold on to those negative emotions.
that's the problem. Most people hold on to them.
The whole idea of timeline therapy, because that's what we do, and I'm biased, of course, I'm talking about this very much because that's what we do, is to recognize the negative emotions, not to put them down, not to dissociate from them, not to reject them, but to recognize them and let them go. Only from the past. Sometimes people ask us, but I don't want to become a robot without emotions. No,
You won't.
you won't. It's not
We
like you won't
promise.
have any emotions or negative emotions if something bad happens.
If something
to
goes
you.
wrong right now, you're still going to have negative emotions because the future hasn't happened yet.
And if your values are violated, or if your boundaries are being crossed over, or somebody treats you poorly, of course
You'll
you're
still
going to
get upset.
experience negative emotions. But what's the point in carrying a luggage, heavy luggage, metaphorically speaking, of negative emotions programmed in your unconscious mind from the past? Maybe they happened, I don't know, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. What's the point? And what people need to understand, and this is a great revelations when people get it. Indeed, as you very well know, Johannes, in your work in meta health, is when they really get it, that actually the negative emotions do create disease. That's a big aha moment. That's
And
a big
they do.
aha moment,
And
and
they
they
do.
do.
So true. You know, I think I heard this story the first time from you guys, and maybe you tell it if you don't mind. The Huna story about the little bag. I think I heard it from you, Ted,
Yeah.
the first time, which I think is just makes it very visual what happens in the body,
Right.
the emotions.
In Huna, what they talk about is they talk about the negative emotions being in little black bags. So what they say is that if you have a negative emotion or a limiting decision that occurs with a memory, yeah, that'll be good. We'll pretend this is a
we'll
black bag.
pretend this is a little black bag, yeah?
Oh,
This is a
okay,
little-
we're
pretend this
drinking
is-
break.
We'll pretend this is a little black bag. So what you do is the unconscious mind, when there's a negative emotion or limiting decision, that exists, the unconscious mind takes and sticks that into a little black bag, and then takes the bag and shoves it down somewhere.
Puts it somewhere in the body. Like takes it and puts it somewhere, yeah?
Now the problem is that black bag is stored somewhere in the body. That's the problem. The problem is that the black bag is stored, and what it does is it interferes with information that's supposed to flow along the neural network pathways. So the black bags actually gum up the works. And that's how we can have areas of the body which are not particularly positive in terms of health.
Right.
So the black bags are negative to health because, according to Dr. Paul Goodwin, he was is a professor of neurophysiology at Alaska Pacific University and a full-blooded Eskimo, by the way. And he says that the black bags or the blockages to the neural network information cause information to be sent wrongly or incorrectly to the various parts of the body, which is pretty much along the lines of what Meta Health says, except that it comes from the brain relay. But I think it's possible either one.
Well, I think
Yeah, so
And so what happens when this emotion comes back up? Because one of the things I've experienced for myself, clients, and in meta health in general, that we go through life, suddenly an emotion comes back up again and again, and we just press it down. What's that process?
sure.
That's what most people do. The problem is it comes back up again, and we don't have the means to deal with it. We don't know how to let it go. So what we do is we shove it down. we repress it. We keep it repressed, and what happens is that it comes back up. The unconscious mind isn't evil. It's not dirty. It's not nasty. It's not out to get you. It's just that the job of the unconscious mind is to assist you to let go of negative emotions, so it brings them up.
One practical application that we found very useful that we started doing in the last couple of years maybe is that when triggers fire and one of the old events that we have done timeline therapy on already still becomes lit up, it's like in your face again and again and again, what we found out to be very useful is the drop down through technique.
In timeline therapy.
We found very useful and gets rid of triggers. Also submodality shift or submodality. So together, submodality shift alone may not do it. Submodality shift, let me explain a little bit what this is because it's NLP jargon. It's simply a process by which we change the characteristics of the image we hold in our minds, the image which represents the Udin moment. And we change the characteristics in terms of color, brightness, distance from where we imagine it to be. Like if I have my inner screen and the image seems to be close or far or to the right or to the left, we change all of those things.
Location.
That seems to work really well in preventing triggers to reactivate, so thus creating a chronic condition. Also, something interesting that, see, this is where NLP serves us so well, Johannes. And of course, I'm talking about this. I'm biased. I recognize I'm biased, but I see
we work in the field
because that's what we do in the field, right? So, I mean, I'm talking about the field we're in all day long. We discovered something really important, we think, in terms of people that have conflicts on both sides of the brain, thus constellations, right? So regardless of your handedness, it's interesting to notice, and when the balance of the constellations changes from the male hemisphere to female hemisphere, the eye patterns change from normally organized to reverse organized. And we notice that in our students, they come to practitioner, which is the 7 days, right? And they do timeline therapy the first time. They let go of a lot of negative emotions. Now, what's that doing? That's solving past conflicts,
and
right?
Constellation, it switches the
and all of a sudden, they solve part of their conflicts, and the scale tips over. They come to the master practitioner and they say, in the practitioner, I thought I elicited my eye patterns, to see how they are. And I thought I was normally organized. Now I test reverse organized. Then we asked Dave Shepard in London.
We've been checking this out.
Who does a lot of trainings too. And he reports the same
40%,
thing.
40%
40 to 50% of his students report the same thing. Now, we know very well from Meta Health that a big percentage of people experience constellations. And it's kind of understandable why, right?
A normal situation, probably. But
it's a normal situation.
Talk about that a little bit, because I think a lot of people that listen, and I don't know if you just heard about the new psychiatric manual that came out, DSM-5.
Oh.
I've been trying to get a copy of it on Kindle.
Yeah, good luck reading that one.
Good luck getting it on
Kindle.
Kindle.
Timeline therapy after that one.
Yeah, I bet.
No, but my point is that the danger that what happens right now, that a lot of health issues are considered to be psychological health issues, and I mean, you name it basically.
Right.
See, I'm moving my hand now, and at some point that's going to be considered like a restless hand movement or something.
Restless hand syndrome.
There you go, syndrome.
I like
have
it.
a syndrome now.
I like it.
But tell the audience, because I think a lot of people are scared about these things, that what's called bipolar, depression, a lot of these psychological health issues, and in Meta Health, obviously, we call them combinations or constellations, where you several brain organ issues are happening at the same time, and that's when we have these psychological issues, less physical but more psychological. Talk from your experience a little bit, how you deal with them, how successful.
How do you deal with the people, or how do you deal with the diagnosis? How do you deal with people, or how do you deal with the diagnosis?
Not so much a diagnosis, because from my point of view, that's not so much the important thing. I mean, that's just a label, putting a label on. But how how do you work with people that have, let's say, bipolar depression or whatever, and how do you what's your success rate there, or yeah?
And you guys don't even have such a big problem in Europe. In the US, there's this, bipolar as it was called. Now it's called, what is it called? It's not bipolar.
No,
It's
it
called,
was manic depressive. And
it
now
was
it's
manic.
bipolar.
Oh, now it's bipolar. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Here is like an epidemic. Diagnosis of a diagnosis.
There's a great percentage of people in the United States on psychoactive drugs. And personally, I don't go up against what medicine says. But I need to say one thing, and that is, and if you are interested, there are documentaries on the fact. There is no blood test or no MRI. There's no tests, including the brainwave tests. There's not a single test that can verify any of the diagnoses in the DSM-5. So the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual is not a manual of that where you can relate a blood test to a particular symptomology. There's no relationship, or there's no relationship between the symptomology and the test itself. There is no test that can test for anything like that except observation. That's one of the interesting things. So these are, in my opinion, are conjecture.
Now, practically, what do we do about that? That was part of your question,
Yes,
correct?
yes. And also, in somebody's listening, they have the symptomology. I mean, it doesn't mean they're making it up,
No,
right?
sure.
They do have certain symptoms.
No,
But what can they do?
definitely they are not making it up.
I think you have to, by the way, I think you have to differentiate between making it up and whether or not it's a diagnosis. So let me just talk about Dr. Erickson for a little bit. Milton Erickson was a medical doctor. He died in 1980. He was single-handedly one of the reasons why hypnosis came off the stage and became a medical intervention in 1957. It was approved by the American Medical Association. And Erickson, I listened to a video an audio tape of him with John Weakland. And Weakland said, Dr. Erickson, what about dual personalities? That's what it was called in the day that he was interviewed. It was, what about dual personalities? And Erickson said, I don't believe in dual personalities. I believe that we should teach each of them to get along with each other. So while there's a diagnosis, the diagnosis is probably not the only way of describing the problem. The diagnosis is one description. Stephen Gilligan, I was on the Erickson Congress in 1992 as one of the presenters, and Stephen Gilligan got up and he said, I no longer do diagnosis. We were on a panel for depression. And Gilligan said, I no longer diagnose my patients, and the doctors in the room were upset because he said he stopped doing diagnosis because he found that doing a diagnosis put his patients in a box that he didn't like to have his patients in. He couldn't think outside the box because once he labeled somebody bipolar, then that was a box in which they were in. And if you've read I've read the DSM-4 and I read the DSM-3, which is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association. Those are boxes which you can put people in, but what it does when you put them in the box, I know it's good for getting the insurance money, but the rest of it is the issue of once you put the person in the box, you can't think of them outside the box. And that's a problem, and therapy is an interaction between two people. It's not just an interaction of one person on another. So as we said this earlier in this interview, the beliefs that the doctor has will affect the client, will affect the patient, such that the patient may or may not recover based on the beliefs that the doctor has.
Right. If somebody is labeled bipolar,
ADD, ADHD.
then what do you do? What do you do? He's just labeled. He's already firmly put in that box.
And he may believe it.
And
he'll say, I am a depressive.
Oh, here's
I am a
yeah.
manic depressive.
Because I think a lot of parents, that's a big issue. I know in schools in America, with more and more kids are prescribed Ritalin. I think it's an incredible high amount that gets drugs to calm them down, with prevention.
But here's an article I just read the other day that people, they figured out that they can take people off cocaine by giving them Ritalin. What's that telling you about Ritalin?
And how would you work with somebody that has ADHD, children? How would you work with them?
Oh, with children with ADHD?
Children are easy. Make it a game.
We don't want to make any claims of any sort, but it didn't take us more than 45 minutes to have a child, and usually we make appointments 2 to 3 hours, the parents present, and it didn't take us never longer than 45 minutes to actually have a child be able to let go of their bouncing around the room, nervous behavior, and also working with dyslexia, because it's one of the diagnoses now in schools all along. It didn't take us more than 1 hour to have a child be able to spell correctly a word backwards. And the parent, it doesn't believe. And it's a very simple process. And here's something that everybody can do. Any parent can do with their children. First of all, ADD, ADHD, it's a problem, and it's diagnosed and say children are not able to focus. No, that's not the problem. The problem is that children are in tunnel vision. They are in foveal vision all the time, and that's very clear because of computer games, because of iPhones, because of gadgets that narrow down the focus of a child.
Foveal vision is the central part of the vision. It's the central part of the eye.
Only when we focus on something intently. Now, all the other part of the eye, which the eye is designed, the cells in the eye are designed for, is the peripheral vision.
So peripheral vision is everything around the center.
So here is what a parent can do right now with their children. Have the child pick a spot on the wall above eye level and focus on that spot. As the child focuses his or her attention on that spot on the wall,
the awareness begins to spread out into the peripheral.
Now the parent being behind, imagine that these two hands are the parent behind the child, and I'm playing the child. As the child focuses his or her attention on that spot, the parent should bring the hands as far in as the child can see them both at the same time. So ask the child, can you see my both hands here? And some children are not able to see the hands even here, both at the same time.
Video games are especially good at installing foveal vision.
So as far as the child can see them, and then slowly moving the fingers up and down, say, keep your attention focused on my both hands. Can you see them both? Yes, I can. Then move your hands about 1 inch or 1 centimeter out. And then do this again. Can you see my both hands? Yes, I can. Can you see my both hands now? Yes, I can. And so that the peripheral vision of the child opens up again until it's virtually 180 degrees and looking straight forward. So the child doesn't do this. Still, the head is there forward, can see both hands moving up and down at the same time, 180 degrees.
We teach how to do this at our NLP practitioner training.
Now, the instruction, here is something that every parent can do right now with their children. It's not difficult. The instruction for the child is to do this every single time before they go to school in the morning. Same thing.
Especially in the car on the way to school if they're driving their kid to
Open
school.
up peripheral vision, and when they go into the class, the same thing. Before the teacher starts talking, put attention on focus on the wall above eye level, open up peripheral vision, lower the eyes, look at the teacher, but maintain that peripheral vision. Now, what's that going to do? It's going to put the child in a mild, totally conscious, focused trance, which stops the bouncing around the room behavior immediately.
It generally takes 1 session to get rid of all ADHD.
This is very simple to do, and it works like magic. So when you do this, the instruction for the parents is to do this every morning, and for the child is to do this every time they come from recess back into the classroom. And after about 2 weeks, the child's going to say, I don't want to do that anymore. But it's installed, and they are doing it automatically.
Right.
So that's a very practical, easy to do process that helps tremendously.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. I mean, this is a great exercise. And I think what I'd like to ask everybody listening or watching the video to comment on Facebook, on our Facebook page, or Summit Facebook page, and really practice that exercise. Anything else you'd like to say? We're already way over an hour, so anything else you feel is really important, especially when we talk about negative emotions, limiting beliefs, and its effect?
I'd like to say something not about negative emotions. I'd like to say something to acknowledge your guys' work in the Meta Health Organization. We know you guys for a long time as our graduates, and the fact that you
Actually, the 3 major principals have all been our students.
Yes, and you have taken this and focused on it and researched
It's
and
beautiful.
further studies and developed it, and you're doing the work you're doing is incredible. As you know, our high value in doing trainings is transforming the planet one person at a time by the trainings we're doing. You are doing the same thing by really doing something practical to help, not only talking about it, but also doing something practical and putting a lot of effort and work. And we'd like to acknowledge you.
Yeah, we'd like to acknowledge you guys for all the good work you're doing.
Really.
Thank you. Really appreciate
It's
that.
I know.
marvelous.
I know from paying attention, it's not easy necessarily.
Yeah. I mean, I think everything. Whenever you do something that is innovative, like you guys, with developing new technologies, new methods, it takes energy to transform and to kind of open up the vision, as you said before, and so people see the possibilities. And to me, I think medicine or health it's such a transformational process right now, and I think in a few years we look back and say, wow, that's how we did things then.
Yeah.
Mental health has this creates models and is this platform that really everybody can use, and that is why in the summit here we have from patients, people that are healthy already, they live a very healthy lifestyle, to people that have major health issues, to all types of health professionals listening in, and I hope they're inspired to really move forward and help transform healthcare into something we all want it to be.
That's really wonderful, Johannes. That's really wonderful.
So thank
That's
you again
great.
so much for spending the time, for inspiring people that listening in, and I really appreciate it. You guys are great. And thank you so much for being part of the Mental Health Summit.
Good to see you.
Thank you, Johannes.
Thank you so much.